Test 1, 2.
Sure. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Planning Committee. I am Councillor Mike Lilly and I am Chair of the Planning Committee. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall to St Runwell Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. Members of the committee and officers will now introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Good evening everyone. Councillor Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Mike Hogg, St Anne's and St John's Wards.
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch.
Good evening, Roger Mannion representing Tiptree Ward.
Martin Warnes, Beerchurch Ward.
Philip Morton, Planning Officer.
Daniel Cooper, Planning Officer.
Simon Grady, Planning Officer. John Miles, Planning Officer.
James Ryan, Planning Manager.
And Simon Cairns, Joint Head of Planning.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
We're just going to get Councillor McLean a microphone as we appear to have left. So we'll just crack on. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will have a break after the completion at 7:30 p.m. or at an appropriate time. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi
Back on. Well, so you're on. Thank you.
And now he's doing the limbo as well. Well done. Thank you very much. So now we'll carry on where we left off. So we start again. Whilst determination of a plan application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies. Reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. Substitutes, there are no substitutions this time. Declarations of interest. Councillors, any declarations? None. If anything comes up, we can just take it as there if you think of anything. Thank you. Urgent items? There are no urgent items. We have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. No, thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of August 2023. Colleagues, any points of accuracy to be raised? Are we happy with the minutes? Are we all agreed? We're all agreed. I'll sign them after the meeting. Now we move on to the applications for tonight and have your say speakers. So we have 5 applications for this evening, and we have speakers on the first 2 items. On 7.1 we have James Ryan, who's the presenting officer, public speaking against Graham Barney, and the public for Andrew Owen. And we've got visiting councillor, Councillor Ellis. Then 7.2 we've got John Miles as the plan officer, and we have Robert Pomeroy speaking for Councillor Young, the visiting councillor on that. For 7.3, the car park to the north of Napier Road, 7.4, the kiln, the Folly Lair de la Haye, and 7.5, 14 Trinity Square, Colchester. We have no speakers for or against, or no councillors. So therefore, colleagues, we could, if you wanted to, take all 3 items on block, unless you want to call any of the applications out. Have I got a proposer to call all 3 on block? Councillor Sam McCarthy. A seconder, please. Councillor Lee Tate. So all those in favour of taking those 3 items on block, please raise your hands.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. I've just got to read this legal bit. I can confirm that these items have been determined in line with the officer recommendation in the report and amendment sheet, and there will be not further discussion on those items. Any interested parties in attendance for those items may wish to leave now, and the same with the officers if you wish to pop off, or you can stay for the rest of the evening.
They're out the door.
As we're losing 3 officers, we've got a bit of space. It's a bit tight on the left-hand side. If any councillors want to move over to the right, personally, I always go. I am left to the left of politics myself, so I stay there. But if you wish to move over a bit more space, you can do so now, please. If you got all snug now. So, okay, so now we move on to 7.1, which is land off Hall Road, Copford, Colchester, and we have James Ryan to present the case, please. James.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. Just wait for my tray to load. So we're here to have a look at the land off Hall Road in Copford, application reference 231640, 50 dwellings and associated infrastructure. Here, we've got some speakers here tonight, so I'll whiz through the presentation as I'm sure the questions will be brought out in the discussion. But this is the red line plan. Here is a detailed development layout, kind of laid over an aerial image. We've blown one up that's a little bit bigger further down, so you'll see that in more detail in a minute. That shows you the context. This is the landscape strategy. So you can see the public open space in the middle, additional trees that are going along the southern boundary and boundary with the public right of way to the west, plus the planting throughout. This is a highways drawing. The agents have provided a coloured up version of that because that doesn't come up very well on there, so I've blown one of those up in a much clearer image. You'll see that in a bit. Here are some street scene drawings. The dwellings in the centre are the kind of where the various design cues have been taken from, and the street scene across the top is on one side of the public open space. The one at the bottom, street elevation B, is on the other side of the public open space. This is along the entranceway and across the view you'll get walking along the public right of way across the bottom. You can see generally kind of Essex vernacular dwellings, but the agents have helpfully shown where they've picked up the kind of social courses, string courses, small dormers, that kind of thing from the local vicinity. More street elevations here. I'll just whiz you through the house types. I mean, you've seen them in the street elevations, but they're all very attractively detailed houses. Come back to any of these if anyone wants any further detail. Some site photos. So this is London Road looking towards Hall Road. Looking straight up Hall Road. Because we've got lots of some visitors to the site today. That's London Road again. Further up London Road. Further up London Road. That's just having walked through the public right of way that's in the west, the northwest corner of the site. So I'm standing at a higher level there because the public right of way kind of tapers down to site level, starts off quite high. So that's looking back across to the access point. Walking down the public right of way. That's the long garden of the neighbour to the west, and their tree planting and the public right of way heading off. That's looking back across the site. That's from the corner of the site looking back across to the dwellings at back on from London Road. That's walking across the far edge of the site, and you can see where the archaeology has been started, the archaeological investigation. That's now standing where we stood today on site on the what will become the pedestrian access to the end, the southern end of the site and its connection to Hall Road. Hall Road again, walking up Hall Road. Then standing at the access point on Hall Road, looking into the site. So that tree you can see in the distance is pretty much in line with the public right of way that runs alongside the western boundary. This is where you will drive in to the estate. And that's looking along the northern boundary. Some more northern boundary images. It's the public right of way that just comes down at a higher level and eventually meets the site. It's looking back up Hall Road. Another one up Hall Road. This is an image that the developers took of the existing situation, because they've then provided over that a photo montage of what the access requirement, the off-site access works. It does form part of the site here, but the changes to the Bellmouth on London Road, Hall Road, will be in visual terms. So that's the provision of the footway. I've got a more detailed drawing to show you in a minute that gives you an idea of what's intended. And there's another couple of photo montages. This is what the dwellings facing the public open space. So those dwellings are facing towards the west. And then that's the row of houses as you walk along that public footpath that I showed you in the sets of drawings. So the photos I took. So here's a more detailed drawing of the highway improvements and access plan. The same drawing you saw before, but it's been coloured up just so you can see the carriageway and proposed footway. And I've cut that in half and zoomed in a bit here, so hopefully you can kind of make that out. So in short, a new footway will be created along London Road and running it down the side of Hall Road. This corner here, you'll have seen from the report, is, if not to be encouraged, but if needed, it is constructed with a lower level curb, and that will take the loading of an HGV if an HGV does end up overrunning that corner. So a pedestrian would walk along here to this section here, where there's at the bottom of the drawing you can see there are two little marks where the grey changes over. That's an informal crossing to the other side of the road, and the footway is then carried on sorry, it's just hanging. Here we go. So there's a halfway up the page you can see the informal crossing, and then the footway carries on the other side of the carriageway, feeding into the site where there's a footway on either side. Martin Mason from Essex County Council Highways, the Highway Authority, is with us today to answer any specific questions with regards to highway safety and the highway geometry. He has been dealing with the applicants at pre-app stage, and I think there might be some questions relating to that. Obviously, we've taken our steer from the Highway Authority that this is a acceptable and appropriate access point. I mean, I'll just take you back to the idea here really is that if HGVs, and there are some HGVs using this road for example, refuse collection, and between 4 to 5 times a week, a sewage tanker drives down the road to the sewage treatment plant, which is the southern end of this road effectively. So in the event that at that time a car is turning out, one would expect the HGV to wait in London Road until a car has driven down to the double hatched line you can see there, and then turned either left or right. If in the unlikely event that happens, they don't and they pull in, they can, if safe to do so, overrun that curb slightly. There's been concern about this approach, but the Highway Authority are happy with that. It's really important to note that this is an allocated site in the local plan, and the local plan policy requires a single access off of Hall Road. So the developers are doing what the plan policy requires. The plan has been through the examination public, and these points were made to the inspector by third parties, but the inspector left the policy in with the wording that it's now in front of you as. So on that basis, and with the support of the Highway Authority, officers consider this access arrangement to be appropriate. One thing we saw from the site today is that actually is in the position where you will pull out of the drive to the, so if you're standing where that triangle is, if you're sitting in your car where that triangle is and you're about to pull to travel north towards London Road, presumably the majority, if not the overwhelming majority of cars will not be travelling south, because there is basically, it's a dead-end road effectively to the sewage treatment works beyond this point, so there's no point in travelling south. One would inevitably travel north, and when you pull out of that drive, you do get excellent visibility down to London Road because the road slopes away. So that's another benefit of the scheme in that respect. But Martin Mason's here to answer questions with regards to highway geometry, so I won't tread on those toes. So here's a slightly more blown up image of the layout. We are expecting, as you'll see there are some trees left in the bell mouth. That's just an error in the drafting. Those trees are obviously going to be removed in order to facilitate the bell mouth on Hall Road. So there will be an amended drawing coming in to just rectify that for the sake of clarity, but no changes to the geometry are proposed in that respect. So you'll see that there's a driveway into the estate, and then a turning head at the end towards where the public right-of-way is, with a shared surface and a further shared surface to the wall to the south. Central public open space with dwellings fronting it on either side, so it's got really good overlooking and it will feel like an enjoyable, overlooked, safe place to play in, sit in. We can see that being a nice community space. The rest of the dwellings, as you can see, the dwellings to the north front the Spine Road and back to back on with the London Road dwellings. The dwellings to south also back on to the southern boundary, but have the landscape strategy is to bolster that landscaped countryside edge effectively with additional tree planting, and bolster the existing planting on the eastern boundary and the public right-of-way, setting of the public right-of-way on the western boundary. So, in short, as set out in the report, this scheme is held to comply with the policy allocation for this part of Copford. It is, I better quickly mention something about the planning history. We did have an outline permission brought to members previously without this level of detail for up to 49. That was prior to the examination in public, and members did defer that at the time, feeling that the scheme was highway issues were raised, as has been now with objections, but there was also a feeling of prematurity because the plan had not yet gone through its examination phase. Following that, the applicants withdrew that application. So now before us we have a full application that complies with the policy, and the policy context is far, far clearer. As I said before, the plan's been through its examination and was adopted by the council. So the scheme is on a fully allocated site, and we consider the layout to be entirely appropriate, the highway safety issue to be acceptable, and as set out in the committee papers, all other technical matters appear to be also acceptable. So I will let the speakers talk, and then we can deal with any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, James. Then we move on to the speakers. So we have public against. Graham Barney, please. You have 3 minutes to speak. The bell will go after 2, then you have a further 1. So we're ready when you press the red button. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. There are issues associated with this site. The detrimental effect of building on the curtilage of a Grade 2 listed building when permission was refused for solar panels due to its relationship with the landscape. Inadequate screening of residents' homes, impact on residents and historic flooding of the site, none of which are addressed. However, the most significant concern is access, and it poses a major public and highway safety issue. Shared surface streets are not a suitable design solution to overcome insufficient road space. Shared surface streets with segregated footpaths will not be accepted, as this causes confusion for all users. Bristol City Council, October 22. The road shown is a 5.8 to 5.5 metre wide, including shared services, with the majority being 5.5 metres. This is below the minimum standard for a Type F road serving 25 homes on a cul-de-sac with a combined pedestrian and vehicle requirement need of 6 metres. It is also below the minimum standard for a Type E road serving up to 200 homes, which requires 9.5 metres width, including footpaths. The provision of the roadway and shared surface is in direct contradiction to the manual for streets. The road width plus shared surface is clearly below minimum standards and not acceptable. If Essex Design Guide and Manual for Streets are not being used, what criteria are? The combined widths of vehicles increases the risk factor. Anglia Water state clearly that sewage tankers use the road 6 to 8 times per week, requiring 3 to 3.5 metres width, plus a 2.2 metres for a car, leaves you with 100 centimetres. 2 HGVs, 6 metres width. No space at all, even for them to pass. Other deliveries and collections will cause an increased risk to highway and public safety. PPF paragraph 111. Development should only be prevented or refused on highway safety grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. We believe this is the case with 120 vehicles moving during 12 hours. Development states they will provide cycle connectivity, but cyclists cannot use the shared surface, despite amendment comments. A boundary survey being carried out by surveyors and a legal team on behalf of a Hall Road residents, if proven, will show that the area in front of their house is not highways but private land. And as such, there will be no room for a 1.2 shared metre space. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the Speaker for the Public Forum. Could we have Andrew Owen, please? And the same for you, Andrew. You've got 3 minutes. The bell will go after 2, meaning you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Andrew Owen. I'm the Planning Manager at Dandara. Firstly, I want to commend your officers for their full and considered report and note that there are no objections from any statutory consultees to the proposed development of this site. From Dandara's perspective, Colchester City Council is being held as a shining example of the way in which a local planning authority should operate. The site is identified and proposed as a residential allocation. It is rigorously tested by an inspector at the local plan examination. It is found to be sound and the site is adopted in the local plan. The developer has pre-application discussions with officers and a full planning application is submitted, taking into consideration the comments made and feedback from public consultation. The application is then presented to the Planning Committee within the statutory period with full professional support. From a business perspective, that encourages investment. It provides an element of certainty in what are very uncertain times. It says to the owners of our business and others that you should invest in Colchester because they deliver the growth they have planned for. The scheme before you will deliver new homes, including a policy-compliant level of affordable housing, and the development will provide employment opportunities directly on site by Dandara operatives and local subcontractors, including local apprentices, within our supply chain and in the local service economy. Further investment will be provided to local sports, recreation, healthcare and community projects through the Section 106 agreement. This certainty and positive decision-making will encourage further investment and delivery of the plan's other allocations, which in turn will drive the delivery of the infrastructure, which supports Colchester's growth in line with the Council's stated objectives. It ensures speculative applications on unallocated sites can be more robustly defended. The scheme's delivering a net gain in biodiversity and a reduction in carbon emissions above the building regulation standards, which helps deliver the Council's environmental sustainability aspirations. We therefore hope that you vote to approve the application in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now we'll call on visiting councillor, Councillor Ellis. And you know the score, Andrew? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. At the City Council meeting last evening, we made the Cotford and Easthorpe Neighbourhood Plan. It was the result of years of collaborative work, both within the community and also with Colchester City Council. It's planning done the right way. The application before you this evening is the diametric opposite. Hall Road was not a development site favoured by the community. It was a site imposed upon the community by city planners in a process that was anything but collaborative. When it last came before committee, members agreed with the community and ended up deferring the application so that a number of issues, including the inadequate access arrangements, could be addressed. You have, I hope, had an opportunity to visit the site today, and I sincerely hope that visit has enabled you to comprehend the access issue. Let's just focus on that issue. As the parish chairman has pointed out, the road is shown between 5.8 and 5.5 metres wide, below the minimum standard for a Type F road to serve 25 homes. Please note it already serves 9. But hey, let's shoehorn in another 50. And as an aside, I received Dandara's committee sales pack today, and if you take a look at the site plan and then look at the adjacent homes and their gardens, you'll see the term shoehorn fits in quite well. The advertised public open space is considerably smaller than established neighbouring gardens. Back to that inadequate access and some of the risks it poses. Graham has explained that the road width plus the runover, quite aptly named, or shared surface footpath clearly failed to meet minimum standards, I think if you're asking the planning officer whether, hand on heart, he thought this scheme a good one with an adequate access, he'd struggle to say yes. It fails Department of Transport inclusive mobility guidance. You cannot accompany a wheelchair user along it. You cannot pass a buggy user along it, and the vehicles will need to take a crash diet to pass each other if they're anything other than saloon cars. If a van wishes to pass a car, it needs to run over the footpath. And with supermarket deliveries, Amazon deliveries, water company vehicles accessing the sewage treatment works, and the vehicles belonging to residents of the new development, this is just an accident waiting to happen. And they do already happen on this lane. How, in this day and age, can we think agreeing this ludicrously inadequate access is progress? It's lunacy. And if Essex County Highways advice is that the access is fine, forgive me for not setting any great store in their advice currently. Have any of you enjoyed navigating your way around Stanway recently? Seriously, members, I'm begging you to take a long, hard look at this application. That it's an allocated site is not in dispute, although whether it should have been could be argued with. And if, heaven forbid, you do grant permission this evening, I'd like it strongly noted that lessons should be learned from allocations such as this, where the policy-specified access is not even borderline acceptable, in my and others' opinion, and when you leave your desktop and actually venture onto site. It clearly demonstrates the need for the development management team to work closely with the planning policy team when developing a local plan. Another quite significant issue is Dandara not even paying lip service to the housing requirements in the neighbourhood plan, where the need for bungalows is clearly specified through the RCCE Housing Needs Survey. Communities undertake these plans in good faith and a tremendous amount of work goes into their production. They trump the local plan if made after the local plan adoption date, as this one has been. Developers and planners were well aware of the contents of the Copford and Easthorpe neighbourhood plans and the housing types most needed. Yet this scheme pays that no attention and shoehorns in 52-storey houses regardless. That is incredibly disappointing. Members, I don't believe the current scheme is acceptable, nor do the community nor the parish council, as you've heard this evening, and I ask you not to approve it. I'll just add, when I've seen the pictures that James kindly put up on the screen, everything looks to be the same height. It's another of those homogeneous developments. This is a village. If you go into a village, you'll notice that the roof heights are all different. So when I'm asking you to consider what the neighbourhood plan is saying and the need for bungalows, actually there is an opportunity to alter those roof heights by introducing some bungalows, which will give you some up and down within the development, which I think would be a good idea. And I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll take Lynn, and then I'll hear from Jack as ward councillor, and then we'll bring in Martin Mason, the highways chap. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Before we start the debate, I just wondered if Mr. Cairns could just clarify something, because this scheme is an officially allocated site now, so we have to remember that. It's on the local plan, and it's been through an examination, is my understanding. So I want to know what realistically tonight our options are with this application, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you have a full application before you. And as Mr. Ryan has explained, this is a fully adopted site under policy SS4 of the adopted local plan. It's been through the full examination process, and the issue of the access was undoubtedly considered by the inspector. You have a statutory duty under section 36 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act to determine applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. You would require very strong reasons indeed to depart from the recommendation in the absence of any expert evidence that the proposed access is unacceptable. Indeed, referring you directly to policy SS4 of the local plan, it requires access to be taken from Hall Road. So from that position, I suggest that you need to very carefully consider the input from Martin Mason of Essex County Highways as our expert advisors in such matters. In the absence of any expert evidence to the contrary, I suggest that it would be extremely unwise to do anything other than to take his good advice and the recommendation of the planning officer, because as far as I can see, none of the other matters are unresolved in this application, and the design is a good one that would deliver a high standard of development. So I'll hand you over to Martin Mason to advise you, if I may. If you have any further questions, Councillor Barton.
No, that's fine. I'd like to hear.
Thank you.
Jackie, do you want to go after Martin, or do you wish to? Okay. Okay, so now's a good time to bring in Martin Mason from Highways. Good evening, Martin.
Evening.
Welcome to the meeting.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
You've heard the public speakers speaking, and you've heard the councillors talk about the road and the issues there with the footpath. Can you address those comments, please?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yes, we can. Can you? Are you okay?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I can hear you fine. As long as you can hear me okay, that's okay. That's cool. Yeah, so this is a very similar situation to the previous planning application we had in 2020. In fact, the access proposals are pretty much the same as the 2020 application. They were developed in great detail as part of a pre-app process for the 2020 application and this application as well. And obviously considered very carefully by us, myself, and in conjunction with our development management team to ensure that what's proposed is safe and actually buildable within land controlled by the applicant or highway. I'm certainly not prepared to put my name to anything that I would consider to be unsafe, but given the level of existing level of traffic and the safety record and the modest traffic that would be generated by this proposal, I'm content that the access arrangements would be safe. Of course, I'm more than happy to answer any questions about any highway matters members wish to raise in relation to this application.
Thank you. One of the issues that came out was about the footpath and whether it's complying with the disability laws if it can it take a wheelchair to go down there, and the fact that some cars, to enable others to pass, they're allowed to go up on the pavement to overtake. And is that perfectly acceptable in your opinion?
Yep. So the proposal includes a section of footway that's slightly raised above the carriageway. So I think the upstand is 25 millimetres rather than the standard upstand for a curb. So that would enable a vehicle to mount the footway if they need to get past a larger vehicle. Remember, it's only over a very short distance, and we've got similar situations elsewhere in the county over much longer distances and much busier roads. So I think on balance, I'm content that it's going to be a safe proposal. There's no standard width for a footway. It can be anything from 0.9 metres right up to 2 metres. Obviously, it's not down to 0.5 here. It's 1.2 over the shared section and 1.5 on the other side of the road.
Okay, Jackie, you got any questions for either Martin or you wish to make a statement?
How are we going to separate the HGVs from the cars? And the HGVs can use that road up to 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, there is flooding issues that they have to do, pump out the pumping station, they then go up to the sewage works to offload. So I think we need to have more clarity on the Anglian Water side regarding their usage of that road, because I was up there today, a chap came up in the vehicle, Anglian Water vehicle, and he barely got past me before he was going into a ditch. So the road is not adequate for the HGVs and cars. So yes, there's going to have to be giving way. It's got to work together because the sewage works is very important because it's more or less at full capacity. So, and it's ancient. So we have got to really think of what's going to be going through that road. And it's, you know, one HGV takes up the whole road. There is no way to pass any other vehicle. So, and that's from experience of my own.
Over to you, James.
Just in response to that, thanks very much. I've been provided with an email today from Paul Lancaster, Growth Liaison Manager from Anglia Water. This went to the agent in their part of their pre-app, but it came today to them, and he said, "Hi Andrew," it was the Andrew you saw speaking earlier. "I was asked this question recently, and I was informed by the treatment manager that there are on average 3 to 5 tankers per week removing sludge from the WRC, which is part of the normal operation. So if that's not correct, that's what they believe, is Anglian Water. So I thought I'd better pass that information.
I would just come back to that and say that as we supply them, they're one of our customers, we deal with them very closely. We help keep that sewage works working. So I have an insight of what actually goes on, and we can actually access the site. That's where I'm coming from, and it's just having personal experience of how busy that road is, because I actually live and work just behind it. So that's where I'm coming from. But, you know, if I'm wrong, then let me know. The other thing is, all I've heard today is adequate, appropriate, and suitable. To my mind, it should be second to none, superb development going forward, will work for everybody. There'll be no overlooking on the housing site to the present occupiers of London Road, because all their gardens are open to the back, have been for years, and they're going to have a complete new demographic coming to them. And I think there needs to be some shielding along there. And I would not like to see trees that are going to lose their leaves and everyone's going to have overlooking, because it's going to impose on their privacy quite considerably, which they're not used to. I know no one's entitled to a view, but I think to be mindful of the residents, we need to actually help them if everyone's going to be going forward with this. The character of the village is going to change. We've now got a huge, site in one of our country fields next to ancient woodland, which is going to be overwalked and maybe completely changed out of all recognition, because it's a protected site. So there's a lot going on in Copford, and we've just had the local plan, and it is a little village. It's not huge. We're talking about jobs for people. There are no jobs for people locally that I know of. All the jobs have moved up to Severals or further away. So, people are going to want to be walking to the train. That's going to take a half hour or something to go up the road, or take the car. So it's going to bring maybe 120 car movements to the area on that little road, which they say is not going to be a problem. It's adequate. It's going to be suitable to work. So if you've got 120 cars going, so you've got the mothers going to school, you've got the people going to work, how is that all going to work on that one little junction? And sharing a pathway, you're going to encourage people to walk to school. Where's the school? St Mary's or Copford? We're talking of, having it sustainable and user-friendly. So they talk about the waste. There's going to be a new system for the waste. What is that going to entail? Is that going to be HGVs? Are the dust carts going to be going onto the site, or is the rubbish going to have to be taken to the road every week? So it's all, I know the waste system's changing, but how is that going to work for this site for 120 houses? Is it going to be a collection site on the site that's all put in one lump, or is it going to be put onto the road at the Bellmouth on London Road? We can encourage cycling. Unfortunately, we cannot enforce it. This will be down to the ability of the occupants and the personal choice. How will this development enhance the character of the area, respecting local heritage? Essex Fire considers the access as satisfactory. Would this suggest it is okay but could be a lot better? The Roman River is local but not very deep. Unless there is flooding, it is proposed that water would or could be taken from the river to put fires out, if there, God forbid, was any. There's too many ifs and maybes and not enough detail to actually make it, to me, sustainable. So, I'd like to see a lot more coming to Copford than what we've got in the report. So, and I can't support it as it is, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And just a matter of transparency, you mentioned in your speech earlier on when we talked about the waste, you said we use that service. Is it yourself as a householder or a business? Do you want to declare an interest over that? Okay, just clarify that. Thank you. Anybody else? We don't have any other speakers on this matter. Councillor Tate, please.
I'd just like a point of clarity, please. Did I hear correctly that I'm a regular user of the B1408? Did I hear correctly that in the instance that car will be coming out of Hall Lane, so I'm thinking in terms of school times, as Councillor McLean has said, and people going to work, if there's a HGV, that will have to wait on the road? That seems a bit, because it's a very busy road, that road, it really is. And the thought of a lorry waiting there till something trundles down, I just don't think that doesn't sound very safe to me.
The point that was being made is that while much has been made of the overrunning of the footway, which can occur, in practice, most HGV drivers are unlikely to overrun a footway if there's enough, if they can simply pause and allow someone out of the access. As simple as that. They may overrun the footway and they have the ability to do that while there's a car waiting at the stop or at the broken stop. But that is a relatively infrequent, it was expected to be a relatively infrequent circumstance.
Can you come back to?
Just that with Martin, sorry, I don't recall your surname, Mason, said that there were modest levels of traffic. Well, there are 9 houses there currently, so there will be modest levels of traffic. But if we have another 50 houses, it no longer is modest levels of traffic. I know that obviously Martin's the expert, but I am quite concerned about still quite concerned about the safety and highways aspect. That's where I'm at.
Councillor Walls, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the slide be put up that shows the proposed layout of the development, and also could you show us the photographs that shows Hall Road looking up from the road?
Yes. Whole development first? And would you like me to now go to the facing Hall Road from London Road? So that's the photo montage showing the new overrunnable footway. And that is that's my photo, that's the developer's photo. It's another one of mine.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for sort of showing this. I mean, it does appear that the layout does put gardens facing people's gardens.
Yes.
On the boundary, and the road comes in, so the noise from the cars using the estate will be absorbed by the houses rather than sort of up against the boundaries of sort of previous houses. And I can see that the access is reasonably as close to the northern boundary that you could get. And I note the pictures of Hall Road, and there does seem to be a clear view. I can see that. However, I understand the points that Martin Mason is sort of making, and he's obviously looking at it from a professional point of view and judging it against previous schemes that he may have looked at and may have sort of given advice. And we're obviously looking at it from a site-specific, not that Martin hasn't done that. And I can see that sort of mitigations are in place, but I'm still concerned about the width of Hall Road. And I wondered whether an evaluative consideration of a passing place has been considered on the short stretch of Hall Road, because you are going, realistically, whatever the number of movements, you are going to get vehicular, pedestrian, cyclist vehicle conflicts on that short stretch of road. And it strikes me that the nature of the road appears to be rural in nature. We are putting a modest, in planning terms, it will feel really large to people living there, modest number of houses that are 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses, which will generate multiple car use per house. And as Jackie has rightly said, they're going to want to use services and get to places at certain times. So a lot of rural roads of this nature, albeit longer in length, are likely to have passing places where a vehicle can get safely off the road. So another HGV, a car, a cyclist, a pedestrian can pass in safety. So has that been considered? Has it been properly evaluated? And if it has been, tell me logically why that is not a consideration that has been taken into consideration and dismissed.
Could we ask Martin about that, please?
Martin, you've heard the points that Councillor Warnes has made about a passing place. Has a passing area been considered in the scheme, and why did you not put that in, please?
So that's not something that has been has not been put forward by the applicants. It doesn't form part of the planning application, and didn't for the previous application. I think there are some issues with that. It would interrupt the footway provision between the site access and London Road, and mean that pedestrians would actually end up walking in the carriageway because the footway's been interrupted by a passing place. So I'd be actually quite concerned about that in terms of safety. And also, I'm not convinced that given the extent of highway, you'd be able to form a passing place to the required dimensions in any event. But I think, setting that second point aside, I don't really want the footway to be interrupted, even the shared surface footway to be interrupted.
At the moment, people are walking in the road anyway, because there are no footpaths down there, and cars, they seem to live with the cars. No, there's not many, so here, but there are some, and there's some trucks go down there, and people are walking up and down the road, and I don't think there's been any accidents down there at all. But do you need the footpath, or do you have a passing space instead?
I think given the current situation obviously is very different to what's proposed. It's a very modest number of dwellings there at the moment, and very low levels of traffic. And I think we have to secure these improvements to mitigate the impact of the development. Although it's in planning terms a modest development, it is 50 new homes. And it's going to have more people walking and cycling in Hall Road. So I think in particular walking, we should be providing something for those additional pedestrians between the site and London Road.
Okay, Councillor Warnes, will you come back, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the supplementary I would ask Martin is, one, does he know the proposed width of the footpath? Because he did give quite a wide variance in the widths. And if you had like a passing bay, so to give a comparison, although it isn't the same, think about pulling in at a parking space when you're driving down a road. Would it be possible to shape the footpath around the passing space, given you gave a wide variance on footpaths, so the pedestrian walk down the path around the passing space and carry on? Or would you be able to put drop curbs in at each end of the passing space, so anybody walking could use a green cross code and check there's no traffic coming or there is nothing in the parking space, and then walk across the parking space and carry on? As drop curbs allows people who have got wheelchairs or pushchairs, etc., to be able to actually navigate that, as that might be a way of accommodating all of those risks and making this, I think, a more acceptable proposal than it is.
And given you've said you haven't asked the applicant, and although you tend to raise technical reasons, is that because that is not the norm, or do you think there is a real safety issue with, that would be involved in going along with what has been suggested?
So in terms of the passing place, yes, if you're able to get a footway around the back of the passing place, then that may be a way forward. But I think here there's not enough highway, unfortunately, to achieve that. So the passing place would interrupt the footway, and I think that would probably, in my view, that's not as safe as currently proposed.
Okay, Martin, Councillor Davison.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I too am concerned about the access. It's substandard. I know Martin Mason says that it's adequate, but actually we should be striving for safe and fully accessible access. I hear that the footway's been lowered so that actually the vehicles can drive on that to allow passing vehicles, but it really isn't. You know, it's a compromise, and we're going to have over 100 vehicles extra using that probably daily. You know, it's just not the way Colchester should do their projects. Having said that, I heard what Mr. Cairn said, that the inspector said he expected the entrance to come out of Hall Road, because obviously the other way would just be to buy a property on London Road and come in that way into the middle of the site. So I am concerned, and I just wonder whether Martin would allow double yellow lines or something like that to actually stop any parking, which actually would also block that road. Oh, it's in there, is it? Sorry, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. But as we've heard from Councillor Ellis, I mean, the access is below type F, which is usually only used for type up to 25 homes. We've got 9 homes already down there, and we're now having 59. So it is a concern. Anyway, moving on to other things, please. Mr. Ryan, you haven't really responded to the fact that the neighbourhood plan is now alive. We've heard that there's got various requirements mentioned in that, bungalows in particular, or you know, housing requirements. I also noticed that on DM9, their policy there, it's talking about density and things, but I don't know whether we comply with their new neighbourhood plan density or not. CE4 is their housing paragraph. But the other thing that concerns me about the existing layout, you've got a reasonable play area or open space, but it has a winding path right through the middle of it. So forgive me, children can't use it because you'll have pedestrians or buggies or other people using the path. So I'd like to see that path removed to allow a usable open space where actually this new community could actually hold events for to get to know each other. The other thing, I'd agree with Councillor McLean that the existing properties on London Road really ought to have some substantial screening to give them some sort of privacy, because at the moment we've got the new gardens will back onto their gardens, and I didn't notice it was a 6-foot fence all the way along there. I don't think there is. It's very varied, and I think the developer ought to at least give them some privacy, preferably green privacy rather than a hard landscaping. The other thing I noticed that previously, when this was considered by committee, there was up to £500,000 given to education. We've got a primary school on School Road that's already up to capacity. They've got new porter cabins been arriving to give them more capacity. But we notice in this application there is no provision for education at all. I just wonder why that's been lost. The The other things I was going to mention, in no particular order, you've got materials and architectural detailing on 33 and 34, because it says here, insufficient detail has been submitted to ensure that the proposed works are of high quality, and that therefore the officers should sign it off at a later date to make sure that the character and appearance of the area is not compromised by poor quality architecture. So it concerns me that, bear in mind Braeswick that we considered a couple of months ago, why is it coming to committee when actually they're actually substandard designs? We really should be trying harder to get estates or designs that are suitable. The other thing I was just wondering about, the greening of these properties. I presume they're going to have car chargers on them. I presume they could have solar panels on the roofs. There's an awful lot south-facing roofs there. We should again be trying to get something that's more neutral to carbon, and I see no mention of any of that. So obviously the developer doesn't want to spend a penny more than he has to, but really, what are we striving to do? We should be improving the quality of the properties. The other last thing really is the public right of way going down to School Road, which is across the fields. That's where the primary school is. That's where the village hall is, where all the community events are held. And I know Mr. Ryan said that there's going to be some hard facing on the parts of the path, but actually, with 30 to 40 children using it twice a day, we can't really expect people to walk through woodland which is wet and boggy. We ought to give them a decent access away from the public highway. So I'm just really quite disappointed with all these items, and if you put them all together, you just wonder, could we do better? And I think the answer is we ought to. But certainly, if the committee are minded to give permission, I'd like to see that change on the playground and also the screening on London Road as a bare minimum as extra conditions. Thank you.
James, then before Simon.
Thanks. I'll just try and rattle through those in response. Yes, the Cotford neighbourhood plan was made last night. As I said set out in the report, it carried full weight when we were writing the report, but because it had been to referendum, but it was made last night, so it is absolute full weight, no doubt about that. I have discussed the matter of no bungalows with the applicants. This is a case where they just don't want to provide bungalows. It's as simple as that. There's no policy requirement for a bungalow. I think in the Cotford neighbourhood plan and the supporting information, for example, the housing survey, there is some desire for bungalows, absolutely, but there's no specific requirement that will be provided on this site. Obviously, bungalows have quite a ground take and have a tendency to get a similar sized dwelling or a well-sized dwelling, have a tendency to reduce density significantly, which takes me on to the question of densities. This is about around the 29 dwellings per hectare range, which is what we'd seek to secure, bearing in mind the site was allocated 50, and we have a duty to try and deliver as many houses on our allocated sites as possible. There have been some sites where we've managed to allocate a few more than the allocated number, but this is right on the up to 50 as set out in the policy. On that basis, it is slightly denser than some of the character of the area, but what is entirely to be expected because parts of Cotford are extremely low density, particularly if you look at the dwellings to the west. They have very, very large gardens and are maybe 6 or 7 dwellings on a plot of this size. So ultimately, if we were to allow that level of density on this site, it would be significantly inefficient in terms of the use of land, and that would drive up the requirement for housing elsewhere. So we are really keen as planners to try and deliver the numbers on the sites that have been allocated in the site, and that obviously delivers the 15 affordable units, which the district, the city, really needs, and is a significant benefit of the scheme. Yes, the landscaping is dealt with by condition. So if there's a strong feeling that there shouldn't be a path across the open space, we can certainly get that removed. That's not a problem. That can be just play space laid to grass or a playable area. That's not a problem. Back-to-back screening, as set out in some detail in the report, apart from a couple of occasions where the dimensions are slightly below, as set out in the report, there is in excess of 25 metres back-to-back. From experience, officers are not keen on trying to force boundary screening because it becomes really difficult to enforce. It goes in and dies, and it's very difficult to replace. It's fine when you've got a huge landscaping belt, which can be managed by the management company. That isn't possible in this regard. So on the basis that it broadly complies with the policy, we think that it would be unreasonable to request additional planting along that boundary. Very good question about ECC education. They did require a large lump sum last time. They have not required it this time. We have pressed to find out why that is, and they confirmed today that they do not have the need, believe it or not, for that money, driven by their pupil premium and the way they work out need. And this is not something that officers have sat on. We've really pushed them because we noticed that they confirmed they didn't have any requirements for an education contribution, but we wanted to know why when they previously did. So they don't. So they have not asked for it this time. And they said if we were to ask for it and the applicants were to refuse, they would not support us at appeal because they do not have the justification for that. So that is very clear. With regards to the conditions to do with materiality and detailing, it shouldn't be read that the designs aren't high quality. We think, as I showed you before, look at the street scenes, they really are very high quality. They're attractively detailed, and the materials that we will secure will be of a very high quality, kind of Essex dock bricks and pan tiles, slates, and clay or very good appearance concrete plain tiles. But we needed those conditions to ensure that A, we get the details of precisely the materials they tend to use, and B, we get the details of precisely the string courses, soldier courses, barge boards, and various other architectural detailing that they intend to use. So that's a relatively standard, two standard conditions that they have, the developers have agreed to ensure that it is as good as it looks on the street scene photos, street scene images, and the photo montages I showed you. In terms of green elements, yes, we're conditioning EV charging. Absolutely, you'll see the condition at the end of the report. And they are going beyond that. They are providing a mixture of, in order to meet the building regs, they're going to use some solar, they're going to use some air source heat pumps, and as you'll see from the report, they're also going to use some hot water heat recovery pumps. So that's when you recover heat via your heat pump system through the hot water that is used in the house. So they are going beyond what they need to do. And actually, this is an application that's come with a very excellent energy statement. One of the best ones I've read, and it really sets out in nice and clearly how they intend to go. I mean, the buildings, they're using a fabric first approach, which means they will be highly insulated buildings, because if you're using air source heat pumps in particular, you can't have leaky cold buildings or they don't work very well. So fabric first, but with air source heat pumps, water source heat recovery, and solar PVs where the roofs are appropriate for that. Public right of way to School Road, there is a condition requiring the upgrade. Councillor Davison's absolutely correct. I don't think the intention is to upgrade the entire public right of way from the site across the agricultural fields and through the forest, because that would be a significantly urbanising feature in the countryside, and is not something that the public rights of way team are requiring. They are requiring the upgrade of the public right-of-way beyond the forest, to my knowledge, but that is dealt with by condition. So we will see the details of that precisely, and we'll try and achieve as much as we can without being wholly unreasonable, because it's an agricultural field ultimately, and it will be ploughed, for example, while it's in agricultural use. So there are matters to consider in that respect. Councillor McLean did mention the fire and refuse. The whole layout has been tracked for fire and refuse. So the refuse vehicle will be or the fire tender will be able to enter in a forward gear and go and turn on site and exit in a forward gear. It's been designed to be compliant in that respect. And I think it's worth remembering that it's only a HGV and a car that can't pass on the carriageway. 2 cars can pass without overrunning the shared footway. But I've said it before, but I think it's worth reiterating. Many of the issues that are being raised are matters of principle, and this scheme has been allocated. I think the Highway Authority, but Martin here can agree that this is pretty much the best solution that we can come up with, or the developers in conjunction with Essex County Council can come up with. And on that basis, when there's no plan B in the background, because the width of Hall Road is pretty much the width of Hall Road, this is the scheme before members. And on that basis, and on the basis of the policy that requires an access in this position, that is where we are.
Just a quick clarity. Originally, Essex County Council put in for an education payment, which was granted, but now on this one, they haven't asked for it, even though they don't need it, but there's going to be more children going into the school, which we've heard today is already capacity, and they're using porta cabins. Well, what on earth are they not asking for more money? In doing it, it makes no sense whatsoever. And whoever made that decision has made a complete cock-up, in my opinion, and shouldn't be right. But just to clarify that, otherwise I'm going to go mad.
So there's absolutely no ambiguity. I'll read the email that I received today. We have been chasing for a while, but we did get a response today. It was addressed to our Section 106 officer, Yana. So, dear Yana, I can confirm there are no requirements for either a primary or secondary education contribution for the application. Primary education. The requirement for land for a new primary school, as identified in the local plan, is acknowledged, and ECC may call on this at some time in the future. The current available data shows that due to lower birth rates and completions of projects to expand local primary school provision, there's sufficient capacity at primary schools in the vicinity of the site to meet the demand created by this development. These projects include the extension of Stanway Primary School and Stanway Five Ways Primary School and the replacement of the demountables at Copford Primary School. Secondary education. At the time the response to the previous application was issued, there were proposals to construct an all-through school at Chesterwell, which required temporary permission while this was constructed. Therefore, contributions were sought at that time to deliver these requirements. As Chesterwell has now opened, it would not be still compliant to retrospectively request contributions for the new Chesterwell school, which has sufficient places to accommodate the demand created by the proposed development. Should the LPA consider it acceptable and still compliant to request contributions towards primary and secondary education, ECC would be agreeable. However, ECC would not defend this request should the application go to appeal. My trust is of assistance.
I have to move on. So members, could we, when the officers are talking, could we not talk amongst ourselves, please? Because we can hear it up here. Simon, go over Simon, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly in response to a matter that Councillor Davidson and some of the other members have raised, I just really want to counsel you against attempting to unpick or rehearse the local plan examination and the allocation of this site. It's clear in the wording of this particular site allocation policy that the access is only to be taken from Hall Road. That is the basis on which the inspector considered the allocation. There are no material changes in circumstances since the inspector considered this site at the allocation. The access and junction are the same, the capacity of the sewage treatment plant is the same, the width of the road has not changed. So whilst I have deep sympathy with your concerns, and I understand those, I would counsel you against attempting to refuse something to close the stable door after the horse is well and truly bolted. But you have my sympathy and I understand your position. Thank you.
But I have to admit that we are where we are, because you've heard it tonight that the Highways Authority have backed up their decisions they've put into the applications. Whether we believe it right or wrong, they are the authority. They have the power to do that. We cannot overrule that. We're not the experts in that. It's been gone for a planning inspector before. Everything is against us in this one. But you're going to give it a try, so Councillor Davison.
No, I was going to thank Mr. Ryan for a comprehensive answer, and accept that the screening from London Road, that individual houses can do their own screening if needs be, and that they can access it then. But I am going to ask Mr. Cairns a question, because in Abberton, where we have a 50 house development with permission, a subsequent request for NHS funding was agreed, even though our current policy is over 50 for NHS. And I just wonder whether this one would also get an NHS contribution.
Yes, it has got an NHS contribution, £30,000, I think, for the NHS, this one.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Yeah, just one more thing before hopefully we'll be able to make a decision. You said there's a percentage of affordable houses. I think in one application in the past, in Dedham, I believe, we did ask for a condition that priority was given to people that live in the parish because they're unable to afford things. Is that feasible that we can do that on this one if it goes through? Thank you.
And there's no intention here to provide a local lettings restriction or local lettings policy in line with the application that members recently approved in Layer de la Haye, because that is a pilot, and the idea of the pilot is to see A, how it works, and B, see if there are any unintended consequences from the pilot with regards to the allocation of housing. I think we've got roughly 2,700 people/families on our housing list, so it's really vitally important that we deliver houses for those most in need. So I think our affordable houses team are keen that it doesn't get overly onerously restricted. They will, because of the way that the gateway to home choice works, ultimately people will bid on houses, and there's an intent, it is assumed that one will be bidding on houses in areas that one wants to be in, but there might not be any actual restriction in terms of a bit like the Layer de la Haye one, where there is a kind of cascade in the legal agreement for people from Layer, people from the surrounding parishes, people from parishes slightly further out, and is an actual restriction. That might not cause any issues, but as that scheme hasn't yet been built out, it's difficult to tell, and we're keen to let that pilot run to see how it works before we impose similar restrictions on other sites.
Colleagues, I think we've been round around the garden. Sorry, Councillor Manners, did you want to? I forgot. I apologise. We'll take Councillor Mallon and then we must move to make a decision.
Thank you, Chair. All I want to do really is make a couple of points, because I think we're misunderstanding the whole issue in terms of the footway. I mean, footway is what it says on the tin, somewhere where people can walk. It also means it gives access to people with wheelchairs. And this development has an affordable homes of 30%. Now, by definition, some of those affordable homes are going to be people who have issues, disabilities. They will also need mobility. They will need scooters or wheelchairs. This road, the 50 yards or so from the northwest corner of the development going up Hall Road, will not support wheelchairs and HGV. It will not. I mean, you know, you can't argue about that, and I don't know how ever Highways can think that is a road that is absolutely meant for purpose. It really isn't in terms of that. You know, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't meet the criteria. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, would Martin Mason be able to respond on the wheelchair matter? That'd be fantastic.
Okay, Martin, wheelchair use, please.
Hi, I've already touched on that earlier. There's no minimum or maximum width for a footway. We normally don't go down below 0.9, but they can go up to 2 meters.
Sorry, can I come back to you there, please? Because you seem to be nothing to do with me, Governor. Not my fault. That's what the rules are. I'm not going to do anything about it. And that's what you're telling me. And I have to say, coming from earlier on, that the comment was from our officers that, hey, we are where we are, we can't do anything. The question I also have to ask is, why are we here? If we can't make a decision, if we can't debate it and make a decision because the decision is already made, why are we sitting here? Perhaps we ought to go and have a cup of coffee round the corner and spend our time better. I'm sorry, but that's the inference. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, it's but we are where we are, and we have to abide by the rules and the laws of planning and this committee. We have to rely on the Highway Authority to advise us, to guide us. They have the power to do that. They've made their opinion. They've made their comments. We cannot go against that because we're not the experts in that. This item, it does deliver 30% affordable homes. We all heard last night from a resident coming on. He's going to be homeless. You need the homes going in that. There are no grounds to refuse this application. None of us can think of anything. We can't go against the highway in that. So, colleagues, we need to make a decision. This application is up for approval. There's been a couple of changes made, I believe, but it delivers a lot. So I have to ask, is anyone going to propose this application for approval? We could be all right. Councillor Warnes, are you proposing?
Yes, I will propose it. It is reluctantly, but I understand the advice that Simon has given us. And therefore, yep, I will propose approval because the expert advice is in favour of it. It is in the local plan. We are advised by Simon that the local plan says that access must be via Hall Road. Hall Road is the size it is. I would prefer a passing space, and I was looking to see whether the developer would step forward and say, we'll see what's possible, but that hasn't happened. And given the circumstances we're in, I think we do have to pass it. And in making the proposal, on a side, could I say, when we're commenting to officers, can we play the policies and not the person, please?
Have we got a seconder for the proposal? Councillor Hogg is seconder. So I have to ask, is there a proposal for refusal? So, okay, thank you. So we only have one proposal now, and that's to approve the application before us tonight with a couple of conditions. Do we have a couple of add-ons?
Yeah, they were going to amend the drawings to show the tree removed from the access Belmouth and all the conditions as set out on the update sheet, on the committee papers.
Thank you. So, apologies. We will now move to the vote to approve this application as set before us tonight. All those in favour, please show your hands.
5.
All those against?
1.
All those abstaining?
4.
Thank you very much. It's very difficult and the application is approved, but we had no choice in the matter whatsoever, I'm afraid. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll just take a break for 5 minutes. Colleagues, we're now back and running again. We're on. It's been a few years since I've been running. I'm trying to. It's making me laugh. 7.2 now. Gamut bearings of the Hive station. We have John Miles to present the application, please. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I will begin by sharing the presentation. Thank you. So item 7.2 is an application for the demolition of the existing Gamma Bearings building and the erection of 3 blocks containing 65 residential apartments and with Class E commercial offering on part of the ground floor of one of the blocks. Before I begin my presentation, just as an update, a further review of the viability information submitted has indicated that the sum available for Section 106 contributions from the developer may actually be higher than outlined in the committee report. So in light of this, delegated authority is sought to negotiate and finalise the exact amount and form of Section 106 contributions to be provided, but on the basis that it is ensured the total contribution amount provided is no lower than that outlined in the committee report.
That's actually good news for once.
Yes.
Highways,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. This is the existing block plan. It shows the former Gamut Bearings factory building. There's a mix of commercial, industrial to the south and west. Just about make out the corner of Tesco's down there to the south, and its residential properties to the northeast, up at the top there. This is the proposed site plan. Members will note the development is split into 3 distinct blocks. These are effectively joined by what is referred to as a podium level, which provides a mix of hard and soft landscaping with a view to ultimately form an attractive area of amenity space for future residents. This is the ground floor plan, which won't be, so the sort of elements at ground floor level here won't be readily visible from the street scene, as above them will be the podium level, and as you can see there is built form to the north and eastern boundaries. This is the proposed parking provisions to serve the development. So we have a total of 71 spaces, 65 of those are for the residential units, so that's a 1-to-1. There's also a significant amount of cycle parking, some of which is internal, so nice and secure. And this is just the transport plan, which shows the proposed parking provisions in a bit more detail, including the currently proposed EV charging, and the development is to be constructed in a manner mindful that in the future EV charging facilities will likely also be required for the additional spaces. And here we have, this is the first floor plan. So again, we can see the podium level here. The units, if you can just make out my cursor, so there's a mix of some duplex units, so they're across 2 stories, some ground floor accommodation first floor, and then there's a range of other flats across the blocks. I'll just go through quite quickly now the floor plans for each of the blocks. This ground floor of block A, this is the centre of block B, which effectively is just services at this level. And these are the commercial units which are proposed to front onto Hythe Station Road, providing a new active frontage in addition to the landscaping. First floor plan, block A and block B. Block C. In terms of the accommodation mix, it's a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, in addition to the podium level and the informal amenity space to the east of the site up here. The units are also served by private balconies. And here we just have some more additional floor plans moving up through the blocks. And block B, the central block, is 1 story higher than the other 2 blocks. So that's why I have an additional floor plan here. And these are just the roof plans, which include some proposed PV provisions and other services. So these are some of the typical units. This is one of the duplex units, set over 2 floors, 2 bedroom, 4 person. It's one of the 1 bed units, typical floor plan, and one of the single level 2 bed. So these are the elevations of Block A. You have what is the ground floor of the duplex units with front doors. Other units are accessed internally, which includes lifts. As you can see, there's the parking at what is effectively ground level, but it is to a degree sunken and hidden due to that podium level. It's the middle block, Block B, so slightly taller than the other blocks by 1 story. And Block C, which again has the commercial frontages there, and another couple of duplex units. These are some wider views of the development, how all the blocks will sit together. You can just about make out the podium deck. The parking is underneath, but there's proposed to be soft and hard landscaping intervening. And this is another view. This is from the corner of High Station Road to the commercial units. Again, just another view. Sit in the context, a cross section with Greenstead Road. And small sections. It's a 3D block plan, shows the raised podium level. These are some perspective views, showing the development in a bit more context, hopefully. And these are some indicative CGI images provided by the developer, just to give a flavour of the scheme. I think what these translate a bit more than the flat elevational drawing is that there is proposed to be a degree of modelling, so the fenestration is proposed to be set back a bit. We don't just blank facades there. There have been revisions over the course of the application in consultation with the urban design officer in order to improve the rhythm and the articulation of the building, and it's considered as shown here. The fenestration and general form does quite a good job at breaking down the units and their massing. This is a view from Greenstead Road, an indicative view of Greenstead Road, what the development might look like, the access to the parking seen there on the right of screen. Small views, this is the area to the northeast. This is a view of the podium deck. You can see some of the units and their balconies. Just another couple of views. Here is a view of what the site looks like today. It's been vacant for quite some time, and as you'll see, not in a particularly good condition, unfortunately, and detracts from the street scene. It's a view along Greenstead Road, viewing the residential properties opposite. Again, another view of the site. Members will note that there are billboards here visible in the street scene. It is important to note that they are the subject of an ongoing discontinuance notice. So that's with a view to secure their removal ultimately. It's a view towards Tesco's, more of the residential properties at front Greenstead Road, High Station Road and Tesco's again. It's the front of the site. Again, it's been subject to antisocial behaviour. There have been some issues, and that's why the hoarding is on there with a view to secure the site. That's a view within the site and more of the properties on Greenstead Road. I'll go through these quite quickly. Again, the front of the site. This is a car rental, so the immediately adjacent land uses to the south. There's a vehicle recovery and a car rental, and then there's some commercial, and further to the west, some industrial. As outlined in the committee report, it is within the Hyde Special Policy Area, so it's identified as an area that is undergoing change, and that change is positively promoted, which includes a mix of residential and commercial development, which this scheme delivers. A view from over the train tracks. As you can see, it's in very close proximity to the train station. Some more distant views of some of the development along Hawkins Road, more facing the river, which is arguably more of a comparative scale compared to the development proposed and some of the development immediately adjacent. Hawkins Road again, just for some wider context, a view back towards the site from Hawkins Road. Maponite building, a recent conversion to residential accommodation even. And again, this is some distance from the site now, but it's still within the same Hyde special policy area. And I'll just finish here on the proposed block plan and do a quick summary of the material considerations. To summarise, with regards to the main material planning considerations, officers consider that the scheme before members is acceptable in design terms, with the scheme held to achieve an acceptable standard of architecture and would make a positive contribution to the street scene, bringing an underutilised and currently unattractive brownfield site back into viable use. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the scheme is supported by a detailed daylight and sunlight analysis, and considering the findings of the report and the submitted and available wider information, officers are satisfied that the scheme can proceed without material harm to neighbouring amenity. The parking provisions proposed are considered appropriate, taking into account the sustainable location of the site and the characteristics of the scheme. In more general highway terms, the proposal is also not anticipated to give rise to any issues in terms of highway safety or capacity. With regards to wider material planning considerations, including but not necessarily limited to occupier amenity, flood risk, heritage and contamination, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable in these regards and in compliance with adopted policy for the reasons outlined. The recommendation before members is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions and, as outlined earlier, with delegated authority to negotiate and finalise an appropriate Section 106 agreement and ultimately secure the maximum financial contributions possible in light of potential viability issues identified. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions after the speakers.
Thank you, John. If we can call Robert Pomeroy, please, speaker for the application. Robert, you've been here enough times in the past, and you know the score. Thank you.
Good evening, members. This application was submitted in February 2022. So in the last 20 months, we've been working with successive planning officers and consultees to bring forward a proposal that was appropriate for the site and one which was policy compliant. The work with officers has been a collaborative process, and the scheme has been much altered over this period, resulting in the proposal before you. The site falls within the Hythe regeneration area, where it is the objective of the local plan to deliver sustainable neighbourhoods on brownfield land. This factory building was marketed for some time without a purchaser and has proven to be surplus to market requirements. Therefore, as the local plan objective is to regenerate this area, the site's use for housing makes the best use of the land, particularly as the site is in a highly sustainable location, accessible to Hythe Station, high-frequency bus services, the university, and a Tesco and soon-to-be Sainsbury's food store, as well as job opportunities, all within walking distance. The design of the scheme has been revised a number of times to ensure that it meets officer requirements and is policy compliant. There have been relatively few objections raised in response to the proposal, given the scale and nature of the scheme. Those objections have in the main related to the potential impact on daylight and sunlight to neighbouring property. In view of these concerns, the scheme has been independently tested against BRE guidance and has been found to satisfy the test to ensure that appropriate levels of daylight and sunlight continue to be provided to neighbouring dwellings and commercial premises. The site has a number of challenging constraints, yet it has been possible to achieve a high-quality flatted development which unusually provides policy-compliant amenity space in such an urban location. Your officers and statutory constitutees agree that the scheme is policy-compliant and as such recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. And now visiting Ward Councillor, Councillor Tim Young. Tim, you know the score, please?
Yeah, I've got about 15 minutes, I think. Thank you, Chair.
You have 1 minute starting.
Just a factual inaccuracy that was in Rob's presentation. There is not going to be a Sainsbury's food store in the area. That application has changed. It's now going to be something different, involving an Argos depot and a gym, but no Sainsbury's food store in the old B&Q site. Some of you went on the site visit, and this site is an eyesore. I'm a YIMBY, I'm not an IMBY, and we do need development there. But just because it's an eyesore doesn't mean you can just throw anything up there. The point I want to make is there's 65 units here, none of them are affordable. There's no affordable housing in this development. That's not good enough. You insisted on 30% in Comfort, you should